Cardinal Cupich came out with an article over at chicagocatholic.com, Tradition versus Traditionalism, which I found also very, very entertaining. We're going to link to it in the show notes today, along with Return to Tradition. Dr. Anthony Stein is back on the team today, Fridays with Stein. Good morning to you, Dr. Stein. Thank you for your time.
Good morning. And who knew that Cardinal Cupich was a writer of historical fiction?
It's great. I mean, this is good stuff. I just want to start with, okay, so in the article, the first sentence, the late Jaroslav Pelikan, a historian of Christianity, made an important distinction that is helpful to remember. Tradition is the living faith of the dead. Traditionalism is the dead faith of the living. You know, and I thought right away, if I were a prince of Holy Mother Church, potentially papably, I could be, a pope someday. I would, of course, quote from Jaroslav Pelikan, because all other, Christian historians were apparently taken and not available. I mean, Jaroslav Pelikan, why not?
Yeah, I'm not even familiar with him. I'm assuming he's not even a Catholic.
Well, he wasn't. No, he was a Protestant scholar. His dad was a Protestant, and then he and his wife converted to the Orthodox. After meeting JP2, they went Orthodox and died Orthodox. So there's that. So out of all the church historians, Jaroslav Pelikan is the one Cardinal Cupich chooses from. I think that's very telling, don't you?
How do you feel being called faithless, though? Because that's what that is. I mean, the dead faith of the living, that's calling people faithless.
Yeah.
That's brazen. That is brazen. And it's I note this morning in my live stream that this seems to be another sign that for whatever reason, a lot of the more progressive wing of the American prelates feel emboldened right now. For whatever reason, they feel like they can go and say and do things that are just brazen. Heard the news out of Charlotte where they're coming after now Reverent Novus Ordo masses and, of course, traditional masses at Catholic schools, right? I mean, they're going everywhere it can be found. The bishop there is taking care of it. It just seems brazen. So I don't know, but Cardinal Cupich calling an entire sector of the church, a very vocal sector of the church, faithless, that's impressive for a cardinal.
In the article itself, he seems to me, and I want to get your take on this, because it seems to me he's doing a little bit of bait and switch. He starts off talking about John Henry Newman, and he says a key factor in his decision to join the Catholic Church was his understanding of the development of doctrine. Now that John Henry Cardinal Newman's been named a doctor of the church. So it's all about development of doctrine. But he goes on, and then he quotes St. Vincent of Lerins. And he says, whatever develops at a later age was already present in seminal form. There was nothing new in old age that was not already latent in childhood. And as I was saying yesterday with Hitchborn, I hate to admit this publicly, but I agree with Cupich. Yeah, okay. Everything was there already. It was prefigured in the old, the entirety of the New Testament, the entirety of the church today, all of it prefigured in the Old Testament. It was always there, and now it's clear. Where it was not so clear before, it is clear now. This is St. Augustine. We agree with this. So he sets up this sort of this principle in the beginning half or most of this article. These principles, everything was already there. Now we understand it more than we ever have before. And then all of a sudden we get the plot twist. We get the punchline, and he gets into the liturgy. And he's like, well, they corrupted the liturgy, right? Back in the Carolingian and the Baroque phases of history, they added all this stuff. And I'm convinced, he says, that the bishops approached the reform of the liturgy as an exercise in taking responsibility for the correct development of the church teaching as manifest in the way we worship. In many ways, he says, the reform was a recovery of truths of the faith, which over time were obscured by a series of adaptations and influences that reflected the church's expanding relationship with secular power and society. So the church messed it up, Dr. Stein, back in those days. And now the church has got it right. Seems like we're talking out of both sides of our mouth here.
And I'm trying to find the specific anathema from the Council of Trent, but there's an anathema from the Council of Trent that basically says if you say that the Mass, the Holy Mass of the Church, leads to impiety among the laity, you let him be anathema. And I was reading that article and going, did Cardinal Cupich just excommunicate himself with this article? Because he basically is saying the letter that the traditional Mass leads to impiety. And I mean, his entire article, though, resting on that Carolinian stuff, was debunked 3 years ago by Dr. Peter Kwasniewski, who was probably not the first to debunk the stupid idea. But he shared this on Facebook, and it's truly amazing because what you see here is essentially a differentiation between what the Mass is and our understanding of the kingship of Christ. It is fitting that there be royal elements at the Mass. We are honoring Christ the King after all. And yet he decries this because for him, the Mass is a community gathering. That's what it is. A community gathering, first and foremost. You see it in his language there and in other things. This isn't the first pot shot he's taken at traditional Catholics over the traditional Latin Mass. That's why it almost feels like he's setting people up for something. He's getting ready for people to, I don't know, for some further thing happening. I don't know. It could just be more things in his diocese. It could be that he's going to sweep away the last of the traditional offerings there. Not saying he's going to, just don't be surprised. Because, again, there is just this concerted action going on among some of the more progressive bishops to make the traditional Mass as hard to get as possible in their diocese, almost as if they're trying to push people into the arms of the SSPX, which I'm not against the SSPX. So but I know that a lot of people either are, or maybe they're not, but they're uncomfortable with them. So they may not want to go to Mass with them. And I understand all those things, but it does look like some of these guys are trying to push faithful Catholics into stepping into being credibly called schismatic, which is unfortunate.
I also just don't think Cupich's argument passes the smell test. On one hand, he's like, listen, we can't trust the church who added these things in the Carolingian and Baroque periods. But we can also trust the church when they decided to throw everything out and create something new based off of on a napkin to start with and give us a whole new missal. It's like, well, I'm sorry, but based on what principles are we supposed to decide when and when we can't trust the church? It's literally bizarre.
His article is also banking on the idea that 99 to the 9.9% to the 10th power of the readers of that article have never read St. Vincent of Lerins. Because anybody who's read St. Vincent of Lerins knows that the commentary, which is where those quotes come from, actually shreds the entire position of Cardinal Cupich. Because the entire work is premised on the argument that if somebody in the church, regardless of the office they hold, whatever position they hold, if they introduce novelty into the church, that you are to resist them, to cling to what was handed on to you from antiquity. And he wrote this in the 4th century or the 5th century in the face of the Arian heresy, when 80% of the Catholic bishops were Arians, and the popes of the time were not super strong against them. In fact, in some cases, sympathetic to the Arians, if not Arians themselves. So again, if you read St. Vincent of Lerins, it's very curious that he cites him because he's banking on you never reading him. So I would suggest to people, if you would like to read writings of the church fathers about things that are kind of relevant to the questions we have about the church today, go buy a copy of this book, The Commentary. All you have to do is go onto Amazon.com and type in St. Vincent of Lerins, and you will find the commentary for cheap. If you can read the New York Times without difficulty, you can read that book. I would suggest you read it. Or if you don't like to read and you can handle my reading of it, I have it in full on my channel in small video form. It took me a year to do it in 10-minute chunks. Either way, I first tell you to go buy the book and read it yourself. And you will find it is not exactly the ringing endorsement of changing things in the church, especially if you put that into the context of things some popes have said in more recent years, like Pope Pius XII, who told the faithful that if anybody is looking to antiquity, to ancient practices, to resurrect ancient practices of the church in her wisdom, let go away, that they are engaging in antiquarianism or archaeologism, and that's an error. He didn't call it a heresy, but the way he described it was, if it wasn't a heresy, it at least makes a heresy easier. But most people reading Cardinal Cupich are not reading those things. That's why he gets away with that stuff.
One of the other things that triggers me about Cardinal Cupich's article is his emphasis on active participation. Buzzwords. He says, one could easily read the bishop's constitution on the sacred liturgy, Sacrosanctum Concilium, as a correction of these Carolingian and Baroque liturgical adaptations through a restoration of the liturgy's original emphasis on active participation by the laity and a noble simplicity. And you know what gets me about that is, where in the early church do we find references to the liturgy needing to have an emphasis on active participation? I don't remember. I read so much of the early church for the first few centuries just on my own journey to become Catholic, and I can't remember a single passage to that end. On where do they get this active participation from?
You won't find it, even though Pope Pius X was worried about this too, but his idea of active participation was that the faithful should be praying at the Mass.
Amen.
Right.
And we should be. Yeah.
Right. But you might be aware that at one time in the Latin West, there were these things called rood screens up, where you could barely see what the priest was doing at all at the altar, because it's not a performative thing. The Mass isn't performative. It's not entertainment, and it's not a community event. It's the holy sacrifice of the Mass. There's supposed to be an air of mystery about it. Hence why a lot of, if you're lucky anyway, you can find a traditional parish that still has a baldacchino over the altar. Or in some places, you'll still find more of these older accoutrements. And in the East, they still have rood screens, at least in some parishes.
We're having a conversation with Dr. Anthony Stein from returntotradition.org. We're going to link to it in the show notes, about Cardinal Blaise Cupich and his article on tradition versus traditionalism. Dr. Stein, welcome back. I do want to offer this last little piece of this article, which I found very interesting. He's quoting from Pope Francis here, and this was on a trip to Canada in 2022. It says, quote, "A church that does not develop its thinking in an ecclesial sense is a church that is going backward. This is today's problem, and of many who call themselves traditional. No, they are not traditional. They are people looking to the past, going backwards." So he goes on. He says, in a word, the true understanding of Catholic tradition provides the church with the capacity to witness to the gospel in new contexts. And I think there is the crux of the whole thing. So in the first half, he's like, hey, there's nothing new. Everything was already there. We just understand it better. John Henry Newman, Vincent Lerins, everything was already there. We just now understand it better. And now, by the end of the article, you get, don't look backwards, look to everything new context, new. I mean, absolutely, like they're looking for their get out of jail free card to justify whatever they want. That's what it seems to me. What say you? There we go.
As I was saying earlier, that they assume you haven't read St. Vincent of Lerins, because new is exactly what St. Vincent of Lerins is warning you about in that book. This is why you have such an emphasis on this idea that another idea you hear commonly said is that the church fathers wanted communion in the hand. And because they cite Tertullian.
Where does it say that?
They cite Tertullian, right? I think it's Tertullian. Make a little cup out of your hand, or whatever it is they say. You can find other church fathers who categorically rejected that. Categorically. Right. So again, if you're wanting to know what a lot of the most ancient practices look like, actually the East might be where you want to look. I'm not saying, in Rome, they're using the rite of St. John Chrysostom, but I would imagine that the ancient masses didn't look terribly different than St. John Chrysostom's rite, honestly. But it's evident that they are assuming that most Catholics don't have the time for this stuff. And so they don't read it. They don't pay attention. And they can just say whatever they want. And I don't know why they latch onto St. Vincent of Lerins, other than that he is essentially an apostolic father or a church father anyway, who was clearly in favor of the development of doctrine. He didn't reject doctrine and practices developing and changing naturally over time, but he did reject novelty. And we live in an age of novelty in the church.
Yeah.
It's undeniable. We are in an age of novelty. It's why St. Vincent of Lerins is possibly one of the most important fathers of the church for people to read today.
Wow.
He will debunk all the arguments from progressive types in the church, all of them. I'm not saying he'd be a big fan of the traditionalist movement. Who knows? But he at least would reject novelty. And you are, according to St. Vincent of Lerins, to cling to what was given to you, to hold on to the same faith that was believed in ancient times. That's what he said.
Yeah.
Pretty
or
straightforward.
St. Paul said, hold fast to that which was handed on to you by word of mouth or by letter, to hold fast to tradition, St. Paul writes. Mm-hmm. But, it's interesting. You mentioned Tertullian as a reference, one of their references. Tertullian, if you ever read The Flesh of Christ, it is like a sledgehammer. I mean, he says, if you don't believe that Jesus Christ is truly present in the Eucharist, you're not even a Christian. Let that sink in for how many Protestants that deny that doctrine. Tertullian, writing in the 200s, said, you're not even a Christian if you don't hold that doctrine. It's amazing to me. And then, of course, he died a heretic. So that's the guy that they're going to quote, is that guy. Mm-hmm. I find that utterly fascinating. But the other aspect...
Anti-ecumenical guy.
Right, the very much anti-ecumenical guy, which is funny to me. But Pope Francis's quote here also has a little nugget that I picked up on. And then he says, a church that does not develop its thinking in an ecclesial sense is a church that is going backwards. Well, let's talk about ecclesial sense. The ecclesia, the church, has one mission. That mission is to convert all souls, to make disciples of all nations, to baptize them in the name of the Father, Son, and the Holy Ghost. That was the command Jesus gives in the end of Matthew's gospel. So our mission should be about the conversion of sinners. And yet, so much with this novelty that we see from these hard left-leaning bishops and cardinals is that's the one thing they don't want to do, is make disciples of all nations. Don't you?
That would be that would seem to be what they should be doing. This is why I am 6 years removed now from the Pachamama debacle. I am still flabbergasted that at the Pan-Amazon Synod, there were bishops from the Amazon region who bragged that they had never baptized an indigenous person and never will.
Right.
Completely flabbergasted by this.
Absolutely insane.
Jesus' command was to spread the gospel and to baptize people. It's in plain language.
So, I mean, the ecclesial sense, the ecclesia is to convert, and that's the one thing they're not doing. So, I mean, Cardinal Cupich, God love you, my brother, but I mean, I don't know that that word means what you think it means, tradition. I really, really don't. And it seems bonkers to me. I do want to switch topics while I still have a couple of minutes left on the radio side of our equation, but His Holiness met with the president of Israel, and I found it interesting. Given that we were talking, not you and I so much, but on the show this week, we talked so much about Cardinal Leo meeting with Father Jimmy Martin and the optics of that and the meaning of that. I found it interesting because Pope Leo, of course, accepted the meeting with the head of state, and this guy, or Israel, his team anyway, put out a statement saying, yeah, we came because they asked us to, and the Vatican corrected that. Yesterday, they sent out a statement saying, nope, that's not how it went down. They asked us for a meeting. And of course, we said yes, because that's our standard practice, is to say yes to the heads of state. So that's what we did. Now, what do you make of that?
I mean, even Israel's biggest supporters have critiqued them for being not the most forthright and honest with the things going on. Conflict. So this doesn't surprise me. It might explain why the photo of the Pope meeting with that president was he looked very dour. He did not look pleased at all to be meeting with him. The look on his face compared to the photos you've seen of, say, him meeting with James Martin or anybody really. He just did not look pleased in the slightest to be meeting with that president. And it might be the case or might give you good reason, because they do have a track record of bending the truth or omitting things in a large way to fit whatever narrative they're pushing at the time. And it's unfortunate because that conflict we need the truth out there without question, because that conflict is one of the great moral questions of our immediate time.
Yeah, I found it very, very interesting. I also found it great that the Vatican issued a clarifying statement. Let's have more of that, please. More, please. I would like that. Like, say, after the Jimmy Martin one. Let's try it there, too. It'd be great.
Did you like that video? It's okay. You can admit it. It's perfectly fine. Hey, we cover the big stories of our day, from inside the church to outside the church to all points in between, and we do it from a Catholic perspective. It's called A Catholic Take. It's a radio program Monday through Friday. We live stream it right here on this channel, by the way, so make sure to subscribe, like, and share. We would be very grateful to you. And don't forget, you're going to want to watch this video right here because you don't want to miss anything.